3 past 3. Welcome everybody to our webinar. We are glad you're here and you find the way to the webinar, How Low-Income Families Can Co-Create Innovations. Who designed this webinar? I have to switch the slide. So my name is Sarah Wist, and together with my colleague Rainer Kuhn, we have the honor to facilitate this webinar today. And we are sociologists from Germany, and together with Andre Martinuzzi and a bunch of other people, we are working in the Live-In project, which this webinar is based on. And we are really happy that we have two speakers here, Sheena and Catherine, and I will introduce them to you in a couple of minutes. And before I give the floor to Andre, who is going to talk a little bit about the project and on RRI, we especially wanted to thank Eva, who is also working for the Live-In project, and she also helped immensely with setting up the webinar. So thanks, Eva. And yeah, Andre, the floor is yours, and we are looking forward to an introduction. Yeah.
Welcome also from my side. Good afternoon if you're from Europe. Good morning if you're from the US. Good evening if you're from Asia. The Living Innovation Project, which you see on the next slide, is a project that has started 3 years ago.
Yeah, sorry. Now we have, okay, but if this starts like this, then it's cool. Shall I do a little bit about the organization? The thing is, we are recording this webinar, so if you don't want to be seen or heard, we would suggest you that you would follow us on YouTube. And for the webinar, you already did, I can see, mute yourself and switch off the cameras. But you are all excellent on this one. And if you have any questions, then please type them in the chat and we will get back to them. And then we also have an agenda set up. That's the next one. As I said, the introduction, which you got already a little glimpse of, and now you are, I guess, really curious about how it's going on further with that. After that, we have Catherine Flick talking about her project or her workshop about the future of home technologies, where she did co-creation workshops with families in lockdown. And after that, we have Sheena, and she's going to talk about the Pulse exhibition. And then we have a discussion. So if you have any comprehensive questions to Catherine or Sheena, you can write them in the chat and we will get back to them directly after the presentations. And then the broad discussion we have at the end of the two presentations. So now again, Andre, please.
No problem at all. So the Living Innovation Project started 3 years ago, funded by the European Commission, with the purpose of positioning, of framing responsible innovation as a business opportunity. Before, there has been a lengthy debate, and nearly 100 projects have been funded by the European Commission on a topic which is called Responsible Research Innovation, RRI. You might have come across it. But in many cases, these were societal debates, these were debates with citizens, and there was not a business angle attached to it. And many companies perceive responsibility as an obligation, for sure. They have their CSR reports, they have their CSR managers, but in many cases, innovation is quite aside from this. And innovation managers told us very often, well, responsibility, that's nice, but we perceive it as an additional burden. We have to compete with companies from Asia, with companies from the US, and acting in a responsible way. If it's a business opportunity for us, we would take it up. So in the very beginning of this project, we thought about what are business opportunities that arise from a more responsible way of conducting innovations. And we came up with a structure, with a narrative you see on the next slide, which has 3 dimensions, 3 angles. Responsibility for impact, responsibility towards stakeholders, and responsibility within systems. So let's start with the first column. Responsibility for impact means that as a company, you innovate with a purpose. You consider the impact that you have when you innovate, positive impacts. Just imagine the impacts of the new COVID vaccine, very positive impacts, but also negative impacts. Just imagine the impacts of nuclear power on future generations. So considering impacts is one key element. The next key element is responsibility towards stakeholders, which means a more participatory approach to innovation, to involve people, to innovate with the people and for the people. And this is where the workshop today also is perfectly in line with, because in many, many cases, when companies innovate, they try to implement open innovation concepts. They involve people, but whom do they most of the time involve? When I talk to companies, major companies, and we talk about open innovation, they tell me, yes, we do that. Whom do they involve? Their employees. Whom else? Their families. Whom else? Well, perhaps some lead users, some nerds, some young, well-educated, wealthy, most of the time male, young people who deal with these new technologies, who are the lead users, who have something, a new gadget, and they play around and they have new ideas. But what about the people, the normal, the not usual suspects? And today we will talk about the non-usual suspects, people with low income, families from low income areas, how to involve them into innovation processes. That's the second pillar. Third one is more on the systemic level. This is to innovate on the larger scale, to co-create innovations so that companies together, not a single company, but in networks, together co-create the systems of the future. As a matter of fact, we see that we have health systems, mobility systems, financial systems, food systems, and so on. Many of these systems simply emerged. We never designed them in a way that we thought, oh, that's the best design of such a system. And we see the flaws of these systems right now when we talk about health system. We see the problems in Europe and all around the world, the problems of health systems as we face the COVID crisis. And we've seen the problems of the financial system 10 years ago when the big financial crash happened. So how could systems be more resilient? How can we innovate on a higher level, on a systemic level? These are the three angles of responsible innovation. Sarah, if you could go forward with the slides and skip the ones with the colors. Thank you. And next one, please. So what have we done in the project by now? 3 years of work. We carried out about 100 video interviews with outstanding people all across the world, from the US, from Asia, mostly from Europe, with policymakers, with politicians, with business leaders, managers, innovation managers, CSR managers, experts, scientists, and so on. We carried out 20 webinars by now and online dialogues. We currently work on a series of responsible innovation blueprints and showcases, which means that we can show that if you carry out responsible innovation in a way that it's taken for serious, it's a responsible approach, you have better ideas, and we can show that. We work on a compendium of community interactions because we have a community platform, a co-creation toolkit, which is very, very fresh, produced by our friends from Dialogic. It will be uploaded, I heard, in 2 days from now. So it's really, really hot. We work on policy briefs, bookings, and presentations. So this is what we've done by now. And today we will focus on how to co-create innovations together with low-income families.
Yes, and before we do so, just let me briefly say 1 or 2, 3 sentences on inclusive innovation, because often the question is why inclusive innovation? And the answer is quite simple, because it enriches your innovation process. And if you're thinking about aging societies where you have people with more and more disabilities or hearing problems, visual problems, and so on and so forth, there's also a big market for it. And on the other hand, yeah, you have so many people who are not into, who can't participate in several opportunities because they are just left behind. And these are these low income families we are going to talk about today. And the most important thing is that it's not only a market or business case, but yeah, true inclusive innovation is in line with the principles of RRI. And yeah, the thing is, Andre, you mentioned it, it's with the people and for the people, because we are always saying that, okay, we have to talk with the people and not about them. And we go a step further and say, okay, let's innovate with them and not for them. And we are very happy about our speakers. There's for once, there's Sheena Larsen. She is the program manager at the Experimentarium in Denmark. And yeah, the exhibition was co-created with families. So she's going to talk about that. But first we have Catherine. She's part of the Live-In project and a reader in computing and social responsibility at the De Montfort University. And she's going to talk about how they co-created yeah, ideas for living with technologies in our homes. So I will stop the presentation, and Catherine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my presentation. Oops, I just realized this. Sorry, honestly. A little bit of a spoiler there. Thank you very much. It's really nice to be able to come and talk about this, because it's probably one of the most exciting and fulfilling things that I've done in my academic career, I have to say. It's been a real pleasure working with these families to co-create innovations, even innovation futures. So a little bit, thanks very much, Andre, for introducing the project, because it means that I don't have to. But the part of the project that De Montfort University was involved in particularly that is related to this was a set of workshops. So we call them the Living Innovation Labs. And we were tasked with trying to find out what high tech at home would look like in the future. And one of the things that I wanted to do with this was to take advantage of the fact that we live in Leicester, in one of the most deprived parts of the UK. And essentially, Leicester is a city of about 400,000 residents, and it's got very, very high levels of deprivation, and they tend to be clustered in areas, very specific areas around the city that are mostly associated with historical factory work. So Leicester is one of the centres, traditionally a centre of textiles manufacturing. And if you're in the UK at all, you will know that it has been a COVID hotspot for a really long time. In fact, we never came out of lockdown until just recently, despite the fact the rest of the UK did, because of the fact that a lot of the areas that I describe here were particularly rife with COVID because of the large density of population that had a lot of deprivation, and therefore had a lot of issues to do with language and uptake of testing and being able to stay at home and not infect other people, for example. So it was a really complex and difficult problem throughout the COVID lockdown. Thankfully, it's a little bit more under control now, but it's still, we're still one of the highest COVID hotspots in the country, and we still have a lot of deprivation, which is only going to be exacerbated by the lockdown. So 1 in 4 children live in areas of high income deprivation, and 1 in 3 people generally live in areas of high education deprivation in Leicester. So part of what my university does is we actually have outreach groups that go into the communities, and we run things like workshops for older people on how to use technology. We also do things with children. We run art workshops, we run sports and health and other various bits and pieces that we do with the community at the community centres. So originally what we were going to do with our workshops was we were going to go into these communities and run full day art workshops with the families within their communities, so they wouldn't have to travel into the city, which is expensive, and also that takes up a lot of time. And so it might be much easier if we went out into these communities so that the parents and children could come in and work with us there. So that was the original plan. So we're working with this local, it's called DMU Local, that is like an outreach group there. So what happened then was COVID, of course, and so we went into full-on lockdown, and we needed to change what we were going to do for these workshops. So what we ended up doing was that we changed it to online workshops, and I'm going to go into a little bit of the explanation as to what we actually did with these online workshops in a little bit. Now, one of the specific reasons that I wanted to focus on these particular groups was that like Andre said, and once again, Andre, you used my words just before I could say them myself. Most projects, particularly in European funded projects, they tend to focus on the usual suspects. So they may have professional citizen groups, citizen groups, or like they'll go to an organization that represents a particular group of citizens. But there's this sort of the idea of the professional citizen that often pops up in European funded research projects. And so we really wanted to make sure that we could move away from these kinds of groups. I mean, if you just look at these sorts of, if you search for focus group in Google, you get a whole lot of really professional looking people sitting around a table. And they don't tend to be people who are match the residents of Leicester as I've just described them. So what we really wanted to do was to break away from this tradition of recruiting middle-class white people, particularly younger males in technology related research or innovation chains. And we wanted to make sure that we could actually really make this a participatory process that allowed for people of multiple generations to get involved. And so that's why we looked at family groups in particular within these communities. So what we ended up doing was we managed to recruit 12 families. This is all done online, because originally what we would have done was we would have had like flyers around the local communities, and we would have, and they would have been as part of one of the usual art workshops that would have taken place within these communities. So we wouldn't have even really had to do a huge amount of advertisement, because it would have been just one of the usual art workshops. So we had to really strongly go out and recruit. Now, we found that recruitment through the existing university community support went pretty well. So they managed to get a few people in, but the biggest source of our recruitment success was actually through a mums group that I'm involved in because I'm a new mum. And this is a really, really impressive mums group that ranges across the entire city and has women from all backgrounds in it. And it was a really good space to actually recruit families from all different parts of Leicester. So we ended up with, because we couldn't really restrict it because we're online, we couldn't really restrict it by area anymore. We looked at collecting some information about them in terms of where they lived, not specifically, but the general area that they lived in within Leicester, that matched up with the deprivation index areas. So, and we can tell that half of our families came from the more deprived parts of Leicester. So we had 12 families with at least one adult and one child above 6. And we had each of the families complete 3 workshops and a follow-up Zoom interview. Now, it's quite tricky to do that, to get your participants to complete like 3 activities plus an interview. And we were really worried about retention, but we had every single family just stuck with us the entire time. And I think it's partly because of the activities that we did, which I'll go into a little bit. We also gave a £40 shopping voucher incentive to complete the workshops. But on discussions with our families, that wasn't really the key thing that they were interested in. They were actually just interested in having activities to do with the kids while in lockdown, because it was coming into the 2nd or 3rd month of lockdown and everyone was itching to kind of do something a bit different. So like, as you can see with our sort of little feedback graphs, we had 100% satisfaction with the workshop. And one of the interesting ones is the second bottom result, which was about having this workshop physically would have led to better outcomes. And mostly people kind of didn't really agree with that, or they were at least neutral on that. So the fact that it was an online workshop, people seemed to really engage with that. And yeah, I mean, it was such an eye-opening experience for me, particularly because obviously traditional physical workshops are kind of like, you know, your bread and butter when you do this sort of research. So it was a very interesting thing to have to take on. So what we did was we asked each family to essentially create 3 sets of artwork and take a photograph of it and send it to us. So the first, what we did was kind of like a design thinking style approach, where we got each family to think about what problems in your home could future technologies solve. So they would come up with a problem and draw an artwork of the problem, and then we would switch it with another family, and then they would come up with a solution to another family's problem. We would send the solution back to the family that proposed the problem, and then we'd ask that family to modify or come up with a new solution to their problem if they didn't like the other solution. Now, we'd contracted a local artist who ran the original physical workshops, and because he was originally going to run these workshops for us, we got him to instead create a series of videos that showed the process of what we wanted them to do, and also to provide some inspiration. And we had some feedback videos created where we created a virtual art gallery and things like that for them. We ran this all through, like, there was nothing particularly special. We did everything by email. Most of our families didn't actually have internet access other than through their phones, and particularly of our more deprived area residents. And so we really had to be careful about things like, we didn't want to have to have them like download files or anything like that were large or anything. So we wanted to really make sure that it was accessible. So everything was done through email. We had a big metadata spreadsheet, and obviously we got ethics approval to do all this through the university. Okay, so this is an example of one of the sets of artworks that came out of our project. So the first family drew a picture here of being bored under lockdown. So lockdown featured a lot, which you'll see in a second. And basically, yeah, there's people lying around, this TV program is boring, I hate lockdown, and mummy, I'm bored, and mummy's saying I'm busy. And up the top there, I love it, it says help. It's one of my favorite ones. And so we handed this picture off to another family, and they came up with a boredom buster app that would solve all of these children's problems. I would ask them, are you bored? If so, what would you feel like doing? And there were lots of different potential things that they could choose from, as you can see there. And then we sent the boredom buster to the original family, and that they thought, oh, well, what we can do is put this boredom buster inside a robot, and the robot can actually do the physical play as well as just, learn Chinese or something like that and have it as an app. So the robot was developed to have the kind of iPad, I guess, in its stomach, but it would be able to physically play with the child. So that's a good example of what the families came up with. As you can see, it's just pictures which they've taken photos of, not particularly great quality in some cases, and just emailed to us. So it's not hugely high tech or anything. So here are a whole bunch more problems that came up with, as you can see, things like mess. We had a lot of insects. People were worried about insects in their homes, so ants and spiders and things. And people were worried about mental health under lockdown, not being able to go to school during lockdown, and communication issues in lockdown as well. So we had a lot of a lot of kids and their families don't speak English as their first language, and sometimes the kids are the kind of only bridge for real reasonable English. And so they were finding it quite stressful throughout lockdown to kind of do a lot of the online communications that were required for the family. So yeah, so there's stuff like that came out. Some of the solutions to these were quite creative. So we have for example, virtual reality came up a few times. We had some 3D printers to deal with rubbish. We had obviously the boredom buster, lots of apps of various types. And one of my favorites is a translation butterfly that would be able to hover over a section of a screen and translate it for the child that was struggling with understanding the schoolwork on the screen. We also have ant detector apps and space hoovers to suck all the toys up and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. And then finally, the last set, so our space hoover turned into a thing that would recognize RFID chips and stick all the toys in the right boxes. The butterflies come in two sizes, one for children and one for adults. The cleaning the mess app has some gamification involved. As you see, the robot came out of that. We had some quite impressive VR things that were controlled by watches and different options for recycling rubbish and bottles and things. So what we did after that was I've interviewed various futurists, hackers is in a kind of hacking and making kind of terminology, as opposed to a hack the system kind of way, which we asked about how feasible are some of these technologies likely to be. So we talked about a tech journalist, talked to a rapid manufacturer, a prototypist, futurist, and a roboticist. And we wanted to know, how do they respond? Like, do they think our families are like really out there, or do they have any cool ideas, or what's going on? What's the feasibility of these sorts of designs? And do these hackers integrate responsible innovation or ethical thinking into their responses? And really, the hackers thought that these were really cool ideas. Some of them, but that most of them were already exist in some way, but they're just not accessible to people of potentially lower income, or they're very sort of high concept at the moment, so they're not actually practically feasible to put into people's homes. So some of the really advanced virtual reality stuff, for example, needs a lot of really complicated hardware. And I found mostly that these hackers also really care about, the social impact of some of these technologies. So this one on the right here is a modification to an Alexa, which many families have, where it translates what a disabled child who can't speak is trying to tell the other children. So Vicky, who's in the wheelchair, is crying. The child asks Alexa, what does Vicky want? And Alexa says Vicky wants water. And there's obviously some really potentially problematic responsible innovation issues with there. If these Alexa programs are able to read emotions and things like that, there's some potentially really problematic ethical issues, as well as helpful things for this particular scenario. So we want to really look at the nuances of that, and we found them, which was really good as well. So I think really the take-home messages from what we found in terms of our experiences with doing these online asynchronous approaches. I mean, obviously we need technology needs diverse voices to present problems and co-create solutions and show their needs. And ethical approaches such as responsible research and innovation advocate engaging with all stakeholders, but in reality, this is quite tricky to do with traditional methods. So yeah, alternative methods to traditional focus groups are necessary to elicit the thoughts, feelings, concerns, and hopes for the future from non-traditional stakeholders. And working with low-income families in traditional workshops would have mostly engaged non-working mothers with children. And this is actually one of the things that we did discuss with the families is who would have come along to these workshops if we'd had them in a physical place, and it would have been mum with the kids. And actually one of the big things that we found was, and one of the most touching stories was this dad who he was only able to come to the Zoom meeting after like 8 o'clock at night or something, because he worked, he's a he worked and I think he was like an engineer in one of the factories, and he was saying that he was so excited to be a part of this because normally he doesn't get to do these sorts of activities with the kids, but they were able to all kind of get together on the weekend and have a meal and have a chat through the problem of the week, as he called it, and they were all able to contribute to it. And some other families had like their grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins all get involved, and it was really like quite a big family event, which you wouldn't normally get if it's just a couple of mum with the kids sort of thing. So yeah, working asynchronously online allowed us to get all kinds of family members to get involved. So like I said, with discussions over the dinner table, in the car, or on walks, and with other members of the family that might not usually get involved. And so yeah, and then I think the final thing is that the outcomes really are about the fact that the technologies that our families came up with, they already exist in some way, but they're just not really accessible due to cost or availability. So yeah, so this is basically my more information slide. And if there's any initial questions just on, I guess, comprehension, otherwise save the more featureful ones for later.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I'm part of the Living Project, but I'm always impressed to see these findings and also the take-home messages. I think it's really interesting. So there's a question from Art in the chat. What do you mean with products not available?
Oh, just like they're already in, like, they're at the cutting edge. So there are things like in product, like, you know, you might see sort of like, for example, some of the advanced virtual reality, or some things like advanced, like people were wanting like biometric capturing things and stuff like that, that like they exist in kind of like a research capacity, but not as a product that you can go and buy off the shelf yet.
Thank you. So are there other questions regarding clarification or regarding the understanding? So please feel free to write it down in the chat or raise your hand. I think it's a good sign that there are not so many questions about the understanding. And
Good.
thank you very much, Catherine.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to give the word to Sheena Lawson. I think it's also a really interesting case, the Pulse exhibition.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll say a couple words and then I'll put my slide on, I think. So yeah, I'm Sheena, I'm from the Danish Science Center, which is situated just north of Copenhagen. We're actually quite a large science center, probably one of the biggest in Europe, amongst the biggest in Europe, which is kind of special for such a small country such as Denmark. Before lockdown, we had almost 500,000 visitors. And we also do a lot of outreach. So I guess it's fair to say that we're the biggest informal science learning community center in Denmark. And I work as a program manager. I'm in charge of our learning initiatives and our international affairs. And I would say that mostly it's concept developing, which is probably similar to some of what you all do. And I will share my slide. Wait a minute. Yeah. So I guess you all can see it. Raina, you can nod. It's going through well.
It works fine.
Good.
Works fine.
Yeah. So we fundraise. That's what we do in Denmark quite a bit. We have some huge. Well, some of the big companies, also some of the smaller companies, we look for funding with them, and this seems to be quite relevant for them. I think we are sort of safe in a way, and it's supporting STEM and education and communication. So this is really cool. So we had this idea to develop an exhibition on health promotion. And I guess you could say health promotion isn't really science, it's promoting health. Obviously we do have science in it, but it's just a different way of thinking than a science center might traditionally think. And we ended up getting funding, and I actually do have a slide with numbers and stuff in a couple of minutes, from the Novo Nordisk Foundation, who developed insulin. And they wanted us to develop an exhibition that was promoting health in a different way than what you might normally see, which is why we came up with the co-creation idea. You might not, often you will see, even wherever, if there's some exhibits on health promotion, you will see people already are living probably healthy, saying, oh, look, I told you this the other day, and that's what they're showing. So could this be different? So this is what we came up with. It ended up being called the Pulse Plaza, which doesn't sound so good in English, it's better in Danish. But anyway, and that's partly because in our science center, we want it to be our science center to be kind of a vibe, kind of like a city, so places you would go to. So that's why we don't make an exhibition called health promotion or the water exhibition, but it's called the beach, or here in this case it's the Pulse Plaza. So it kind of already is engaging in this way. Just briefly about us, so I did mention a little bit. Here's some images for you to see. We are hands-on, we are not a museum, so we don't have collections. We do try to reach many age groups. And you can see on the bottom picture, a really lovely picture, is from our exhibition space that's for 1 to 5-year-olds, and actually really popular. I just love it. I have a little granddaughter of 1.5, and she also loves being there. And we address science, so this is important for us. This is what we do. You can see pictures from our rooftop with children engaging with something with water. which is what they mostly can do on the top. They can also look on the sea, which is just in front, almost in front of us, and see what ships are there, what are they bringing. And the top right space is from our maker area, which we call the Ideas Factory. So these kind of things and this setup is what it looks like at our place. So what did we mean by health promotion? This is what we started with, and I think we started in 2012. So we've had this exhibition now for some years, and it's actually one of our most, if not our most popular exhibition. So health promotion is the process of enabling people to increase control over their health and its determinants, and thereby improve their health. And its health is created and lived by people within the settings of their everyday life, where they learn, work, play, and love. And I think as a science center, this is one of the things we are good at, is setting this narrative of everyday life, bringing science into context, STEM into context. So, so this is what we try to do. And the image just is showing some of the images that actually came up in some of the co-creation workshops, that health is actually a lot of things in our life, not just food. So the Pulse project was to create innovative research-based science exhibitions and community activities that motivate and support families to take action to develop and sustain a healthy lifestyle. And we got just over €5 million, which is a crazy amount of money. This also has covered 4 PhDs, and it also didn't only go to us, it also went to the Steno Health Promotion Center, also, by the way, funded by the Novo Nordisk Foundation. And we collaborated with different cities in order to be able to reach out to families, which with low-income families is actually sometimes quite difficult. With high-income families, we can just put an ad in a newspaper and they come. But with low-income families, we have had to do more. We had to be in the area, we had to go to where they live, and we had to get buses to bring them. But then they came. Universities in Denmark, if not even all of them, were really interested in this project. So some have even done little research things on how we communicate science and other little twerks that came out of this. The target group was families with children aged 6 to 12. And I would say on an inclusive basis that this was almost a shame. I think today I would prefer to say more rainbow families and mixed families and single moms and groups, because obviously we don't get just families. In fact, it's often really full of little groups of kids from schools and all that. But this is how it was set up in the beginning. So overall, just to be really clear, the main goal was to create this innovative and interactive exhibition, which could stimulate and support dialogue on movement and health in the family, and could provide a positive, enjoyable, and shared experience. So this is how to do the shared experience, and what was important. It's actually what we also co-created with families. And I would say that it really fundamentally changed how we developed the exhibition. And I'm going to try and give you some examples on this. So just really short. So science centers in transition. And I mean, obviously this has been for many years now, I guess. But phenomena and promoting phenomena and focusing on that, and some still do that, we've moved on to communicating science in relation to the everyday world we live in. And this also means creating sustainably and socially desirable science communication. And to do this, we need to open up. And I guess this is where RRI comes in. And we were actually part of the RRI Tools project, some of you maybe know. And this idea of opening up to society and opening up to companies is not new to us, but something that we do need to be adaptive towards. And it's obviously an ongoing process. So embracing the complex nature of the subject health, we decided to co-design the exhibition with our future visitors to get this kind of faceted framework of understandings. And so I'm just going to, in a minute, I actually had it on this slide, but it didn't work if I had to go online, so I've downloaded it. So I'm just going to show you the Pulse Plaza. It's quite a big, I think it's like more than 600 square meters, which is quite a big exhibition. And it ended up being an interactive exhibition where you as a group or team or family would check in, and you're necessary throughout this visit to all be there. And you'll see more about this. So I'll just show you, and I hope it works. We have tested. And I'll turn down my sound because the sound doesn't work, but it'll give you a little insight into what it looks like when it's when people are active in our exhibition. So, so we ended up creating this whimsical kind of exhibition, which also was things that came up from our co-creation workshops. Something that you could relate to, but still had a kind of fun twist to it. And you can see there's like dancing in the bathroom, and there's this quirky kitchen that you have to avoid touching the floor because it could be poisonous, and all these kind of ways that you can relate to and imagine that you could be active also also in other spaces and not necessarily in a fitness center. So how we went about it. So we started off with what we call the front end study, where we invited families and brought them in to discuss, and this was families from low income, but also from higher income areas, mostly from low income. We invited them in to discuss on a kind of design process with a kind of avatar. And this seems to work. If we just ask them what they think, it often ends up being shy or not wanting to say their ideas. But bringing an avatar in also seems to work for children. So they will bring this in and say what the avatar wants. And obviously often it's a projection of what they would like to see. We used a kind of design game for this. And we, after that, developed some of the ideas on the background of what they had mentioned. And I must say we fundamentally changed what we would do, and I'll give you some insight into that. Then we brought them back in and said, okay, so here are our ideas. Can we develop this further? And we used Lego and bits and pieces to actually build some kind of exhibit ideas. Then we invited them to a pre-opening, and I have a little video showing their feedback on whether or not and when they saw that we actually, what was important for them in regards to what they had hoped for. And then obviously the Pulse exhibition opened, and it has been opened, I think, for about 5 years now. So the front end study gave some findings. Health is a personal and sensitive subject, and families experience a high degree of bad conscience. They say they know what to do, but they lack competences on how to act, and also see a clash in family ideal versus health ideal. So this sort of idea that we know we should, but, and then Friday and we have a nice evening and it's pizza and we don't think about being healthy and we forget about that. So how do we address this kind of thing in a completely different way? So already here in the beginning, we moved away from an information-based exhibition towards friendly teasing as a kind of motivational factor. And then everyday life, as I mentioned, became a bigger part of the design process. We then brought them back and had 3 iterative workshops. Just here's some images. Where we invited them inside the engine room of the exhibition development, you could say. So we had worked on what they gave us in the beginning, and some of the findings here was a shared experience would be central to the families. So a shared experience meant that it had to be necessary for each person in the family to be part of this exhibition, to be part of the activities. And if not, they would say things like, then I end up looking after the coats and the kids run around. So we wanted this to be the shared experience. And parents want learning to be an active part of a family visit to a science center. So that worked well with our ideas. So we chose this whimsical universe as a kind of scenographic and narrative concept, with the focus on creating and facilitating the shared experience where health is a physical and social experience rather than reading information on text boards. So this is where we moved towards. And now I am just going to show you a couple of, well, kind of 2 interviews. And I actually also put the sound down here so that, and you can see, because it's subtitled in English anyway, the feedback from families, 2 families after they had seen the, experienced the exhibition. So it's quite interesting, I think, to hear their feedback. Yeah. Okay, I think that speaks for itself, so I won't add anything more. And I think I may be running out of time, but just to say that the personalized digital layer at the beginning and also during exhibits is actually also something that was developed co-creationally. So the idea is that they start together, they have to sign up in some kind of way. And at each exhibit, you have to sign up again. I must say we've tried many different ways of doing it. So that's also been a kind of test during the time. How did our visitors accept this, or did it work? We had wristbands and we had cards, personalized cards, and it really didn't work. This works. So you just type in a name, even little kids can type in some letters. And you can take team pictures, you can do some science quizzes in the middle, and you can get memories back with you. And this actually gives us a lot of benefits. It facilitates and strengthens this experience. It provides some kind of personal feedback during the exhibition. It also helps to facilitate the dialogue about family behavior and scientific content related to the activities. Our hope is obviously that this dialogue can continue at home. It creates these memories, photos, something to talk about. So hopefully this adds to it and promotes this full family or team involvement. And sort of just a little conclusion is that this co-design process has contributed positively in qualifying and renewing our take on how we communicate science. We do focus group interviews, and the difference here is that we didn't have a concept already. So when we do focus group interviews, we sort of ask our visitors or people we've invited in, what do you think of this idea we already have? But being open and inviting people in gives a completely different take. And some of the major impact of the co-design process on the final exhibition, and I think I've mentioned it, but it's all activities are multiple user activities where everyone is able to participate, and actually everyone has to participate. And the game rules of the framework for the family's behavior in the exhibition is designed to develop or create a positive team spirit in the family and get everyone active. So we see co-design as a relevant method in exhibition development processes, and it helps facilitate inclusion, openness, reflexivity, and responsiveness in science. And now that we do have the science, the Pulse exhibition there, we actually see that it gets visited by many different types of visitors, you know, people from different areas, other ethnic backgrounds and Danish and etc. And that's just really, really lovely. And I think it's one of the exhibitions that seems to do that more than maybe some others. So yeah, thank you. Here's an image from one of our sort of drawing things. They are not really a family, but it's kind of sweet. And contact me if you want to hear more. There's lots more that could be said.
Thanks a lot, Sheena. I think it's really interesting, and you see the activation and the fun the people have. So you can really see it in your pictures and videos. Also supported this impression. So really impressive. So we have already some questions to discuss in the chat, but I would, before we open the discussion, I would give everybody the chance to also ask questions regarding clarification or understanding. What I took from both of your presentations is really interesting. You both said this sentence, go to where the people live. So yeah. You said it and Catherine said it, just to reach them. And I think it's really interesting if you go to the people, you can get them into your science museum and they will have fun. So yeah, we have a big thank you first from Romy Hölzer, and I would suggest that we can make it more open and go to the questions. And I would ask the people who ask the questions just to present their question themselves. The first question was from Andre to Sheena about the terms of co-creation, open innovation, and citizen science. Andre, yeah, thank you.
Actually, I came across terms that sound different, but that address similar issues. So open innovation in one case is a concept which is discussed in business administration. Also design thinking sometimes is a tool for that. Then we have the co-creation thing, which is a beloved concept of the European Commission. And then we have citizen science that sometimes has some effects on innovation as well. Are these the same things? With different coins, with different names by different communities, or are there some real conceptual differences? And the question goes to both our experts.
Yeah, I think that the citizen science is quite different. With us, it's we don't do that so much. We could, I think we've done a few little things, but like the Natural History Museums does it quite a bit in Denmark. So they'll invite people all through Denmark to count butterflies in the garden or look for insects, and you can do lots more, but that's just what I've heard of. And that's really lovely. People really come into it. And I think maybe even I've heard a recording of bird songs that people took from the gardens, and there's even been more birds singing because of during Corona where it's been quieter, or people have been able to hear it. I don't know which is which, but these kind of things have been really lovely. We don't do that. We could do that. It gives people stuff to do in their homes. I'm not sure I know what open innovation is, to be honest. We don't seem to use that word with us. We talk about co-creation probably before the Commission did, but I don't know.
I think regarding citizen science, there's a broader understanding. Just taking pictures and counting birds. There have been some European projects where there happened really co-creation of future waste strategies and resource strategies in Europe together with citizens, but which was called citizen science. So I think for me still there's a conceptual question: what are the differences? Catherine, what is your opinion?
I mean, I think things like citizen science is a bigger, like you said, it's like a bigger umbrella term, and things like co-creation can come into that. I'm not hugely, I mean, open innovation seems to be one of more of the weaselly, like the more broad, vague concepts to me, because the only times I ever really see that, it seems to me to actually be some of these other things as well. So I mean, for me, citizen science is very much about us, as it's about getting citizens involved in answering kind of scientific questions, or whatever that is. Whereas co-creation can be used in multiple different places. Like, it doesn't have to be answering a research question or a scientific question. It can be used for any sort of, like, just innovative process, or even like, coming up with management decisions or something like that. You can use co-creation with that sort of, strategizing and stuff like that. So, I think, that would be my opinion. We don't really do, I've not really done a lot of stuff under the umbrella of open innovation before. So that's one I'm least familiar with, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have an additional question to Andre's question from Nora Weinberger, who raises the question a bit higher in the concept, I think, between the levels of participation in RI and older concepts like TA. Nora, would you please explain what you think about this, if you want to? Otherwise, I just read it. So in addition to Andre Martinuzzi, I would like to take the question one level higher. What is the difference between citizen participation in RI and older concepts like technology assessment? What do you think?
That's a good question, actually.
It's a good question, yeah.
Because things like technology assessment kind of got rolled up into RRI a bit, and, chewed on and munched around and then spat out again to a certain degree. So, I mean, I think, so part of me, the cynical side of me wants to say that it's much the same because it's the same people doing it. And so it would be the same networks, the same people, talking to the same people again. And this is why I've had such a problem. So, I mean, I've been doing RRI related and pre-RRI concept projects for about 10 years now, and all of the projects that I've been involved in have always just had like the only contact they've had with citizens have been through either groups like representative groups, so like a group for older people or something who send along kind of like a professional advocate in some ways, and it's very rare that actually people, Joe blogs off the street has been talked to, if that makes sense. And so and in some ways it makes it easier to, there's a lot less risk, I think, in taking on these groups, because you know that they're going to contribute, you know how to get to them, you know how to access them, you know what they want out of the process. It's a lot harder to go into a community where you don't necessarily know the community. You might not have any kind of like input, like that you're not even sure whether they'd be interested. And so if you're putting together like a project proposal or whatever, and it hinges on having a group that you're not you're not certain about, that's quite a high risk. So I think in some ways these have stayed much the same because it's the way it's always been done, and people don't like to take risks. But that's my slightly cynical view. I don't know if Sheena has any other ideas.
I'm not sure what I could say about it. I just know that when we worked on the Responsible Research and Innovation Tools project, the Pulse project was actually chosen as one of the blueprint projects. And I think, just to build on what you're saying, Catherine, what made it special is that we actually did speak to the people on the street, and we did speak to companies, and we did work with research institutions. And I guess that's probably our strength, is that we're seen as a kind of neutral place for both the people on the street, but also for the research and institutions and the industry.
Perhaps I could add a little bit to that. I think on the one hand, we have social acceptability and we have desirability. And when we talk technology assessment, to my impression, well, this is just my individual impression, technology is first, and then we ask about acceptability, while co-creation talks about what do you want first. So it's more needs driven, it's more demand driven, less technology driven. I think RI could combine both. It combined it in a way first to assessing the needs of citizens, societal groups, society, grand societal challenges, and then try to link it with potential solutions. For me, the biggest challenge is this gap between the two. So people desire things, you don't have any solution. So they would like to have something. I just remember from Catherine's workshops, the mess machine, where I thought, okay, that's a miracle machine with a messy house. It comes in, cleans up, called housekeeper. It's a human being. In a machine, it will not work. It simply will not work that you put a machine into a messy home and then it cleans up everything. So the pure need-driven thing doesn't help at all. And the pure technology-driven thing ends up with tools that nobody uses. You see this in smart homes, a lot of gadgets, no real added value in many cases. I don't know why I need 20 cameras at home to observe my cat if she's sleeping in the bed or sleeping in the living room. So what's the added value? And bringing this together, I think this is the big challenge. How did you do that with the citizens? Did you confront the citizens with engineers, with technology guys? Did you really put them into the same room and say, we lock the room, there's pizza, there is Coke, there is whatever you need. And now we have both of them, the technology-driven push thing and the society-driven pull thing, and they co-create. Did you really do that?
Oh, is that an actual question?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Well,
yes.
as you know, we didn't do that. Partly because that wasn't really. I mean, because of the difficulty in the COVID this side of things. But I mean, it also was. It was a little bit outside the scope of what we were doing, to be honest. So I mean, with the hacker interviews, we did look at feasibility, and actually I would have to push back on your mess machine skepticism there, because they seem to think it was actually reasonably so it might not be so the idea of having RFID chips in all of the toys and you being able to put them into buckets, it's technically feasible, just very difficult if it's all tiny Lego pieces, or quite difficult if, like that, because RFID chips are still pretty big. So kids can, if they can't go in the wash, for example, necessarily, multiple washes or anything like that. So, I mean, but the technology is there. It's just not feasible just yet. But if you, with the processes of miniaturization and things like that, it is actually potentially possible that there could be, or if toys are manufactured in a different way, if, say, for example, they all get like a QR code printed on every piece or something like that, there could be some sort of mechanism. So the underlying tech is there. The actual the tech solution just isn't quite there yet. And yeah, it may be that if we did get them into the in a room together. I mean, I think having a pizza and evening wouldn't really work for our families, just on a practical level. So that would be a completely new challenge to overcome. But yeah, I mean, I think it could be quite an interesting space to actually further explore some of these the gaps in these kind of understandings of what is it that of the needs versus the technical challenges. And I mean, yeah, so it'd be a nice follow-up exercise, I think, just to see how if we can get it happening. And maybe a place like Sheena's museum would actually be a really good place to do that sort of thing, right? Because if you're already getting families into a space, why not then work with them to potentially solve some of these problems.
Thanks a lot. Sheena, you want to add something?
I'm not quite sure what to add to this. And I think we can be this neutral place. I also think we aren't always this neutral place because we don't get so many low-income families. And just a little interesting thing is last year, the government in Denmark offered half price. Everybody could come in for half price to museums and science centres. And that actually changed the type of people that came. We also saw people who didn't usually come to the science centre. We could just see the way they behaved or they didn't quite know how to interact. And that was just, a wonderful thing in Corona, that the numbers were sort of okay during the summer, and then people could actually come and visit, and they did. So I think price does mean a lot. But getting people to come, I mean, that would definitely be a wonderful thing if they could come more to science centres. I think that could do a lot for inclusion of also people, refugees and that sort as well. But that's a different topic.
Oh, I think the screen from
I think Rainer
Rainer
has,
just froze, but he's smiling. I mean, that's a good sign.
I can answer this next question. I mean, I don't know if Anna wants to pose it herself, but
yeah, Anna. Yeah.
Hi. Well, not necessarily. It's just what is written. I'm curious about the second stage of the process, about the Zoom meeting and what happened there.
Yeah, so it was actually mostly a follow-up interview because when we sent out instructions, and then the families would follow the instructions, and they would send a picture back to us, but they would only usually send back maybe 1 or 2 sentences explaining what the pictures were, so really. And that was what we forwarded on to the next families. So it was only really kind of a very low level interpretation of what the images were. So what the Zoom meeting was aimed to do was to go a little bit deeper into the actual creation process, like how did they create this picture, who was involved, did they enjoy doing it, what were they thinking of, what ideas did they discard, for example, why did they settle on this particular idea? So we asked a whole bunch of questions like that for each of the pictures, and then we asked a series of like essentially questions about the whole process, like did they like it being online, like so a lot of some of those I mean, we did do the graph that you saw from the on the slides was actually from a follow-up, like just a Google form type filling out thing, but we actually asked a lot of those questions in person as well, like what part did they enjoy the most. This is where I got those lovely stories about, say, for example, the father who wouldn't normally be able to participate in these sorts of things, and from other parents who basically said things like, this has been such a lovely activity, we really want to we want to do more, all this sort of stuff. And I still get emails from them asking if we're doing any more of these, so which is a bit of a shame in some ways that we're not. But yeah, so it really just was this kind of follow-up, making sure they were all happy and they enjoyed the process, and what could we improve for next time kind of stuff as well. So yeah. Oh yeah, and I mean, families didn't actually meet each other at any point in time. So originally we would have done this in small, in a workshop type of experience where the families would have all met each other, but we were just very much doing it with an individual basis, individual family obviously basis. And this was mostly because it's really hard to get people together in one space at a time. And especially like under lockdown, there are a lot of different pressures on families, and we wanted to make this as low pressure, low barrier as we could, which is, I think, one of the reasons why we had such a good retention of the families involved.
So my connection is back. I'm happy Sarah took the filled the silence. So we have a direct question from Charlandra. Is it directly?
Yeah, so thank you so much. This is not really a question, but more of a comment. First, I wanted to congratulate everybody on the panel for what I think is fabulous work. And I think, more power to your elbow, and Andre and your team, you're doing really, really great work. The comment I had to make was, a couple of things. One, I think the issue is about the democratization of the innovation process, right? That's what we're really targeting. It's no longer an elitist thing, to our, and I use the word elitist in a very, not in an activist form, but, to the point that Sheena mentioned, that when you drop the price, people came in, and the type of people who came in, so I like that conceptually. The second thing is there are about 2 billion people across the globe who are in that low income category. And as we, get into the new world, the sustainable and, socially equitable world, these 2 billion have a voice, and they should have a voice in the innovation. There are examples of innovations that have been done for the bottom of the pyramid people. So there are many instances, Dr. Prahlad has worked on the bottom of pyramid applications. And but that's different from having the low income or the underprivileged, families and people to be part of the innovation. I think, to me, that's fundamentally a noble cause, and it should be given all the support. The last thing I wanted to say is I'm from the corporate world, and I worked on global teams dealing with innovation. And one of the things that many companies learned was to get a average Joe or average person who has no knowledge about technology or it's not a technical background onto the team, and have them look at what these experts are talking about and the relevance of it to their lives. So I know that corporates are going through that process of getting that voice of the consumer, onto the table. So I'm sorry, I don't have a question, and sorry for a very long thing, but fabulous work, and really pleasure to be on this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So even though comment is interesting, I see Catherine has something in addition, so that's fine.
Yeah, thank you. I really agree with you, Shailendra, about the democratization. And I think actually one of the things that is really great about the Living Innovation Project is because we have these big companies involved. And I mean, I've done this little project within that. It's really showing some of these big companies the value of reaching out to the unusual suspects, as we call them, right? And I think that this is and certainly from the other labs that they've been involved with, they've been working with people that they might not necessarily normally work with as well. And I think it's really like this idea of kind of reaching out and kind of and working with working with actual citizens and not just kind of professional organizations that represent citizens or whatever, because they often have their own agendas, et cetera. It's actually it's a really interesting exercise for everybody, because obviously if you're trying to get someone on board to understand how a piece of technology works, they don't have a great understanding of technology, it really challenges you to be able to then communicate how your technology works to. And I mean, we've all probably had those you know, we've bought a new gadget, we've brought it home, we open up the manual and it's written in just like the most technical jargon you can possibly imagine. And you know, there's the ability to actually communicate technology is really, really underrated, I think. And so even just on a communication level, it's a really good exercise, let alone on the actual innovation process. So I think that, you know, it's very much kind of baby steps, as we say at the moment. And I think, you know, there's a lot more that we can be doing in this area as well, because obviously, like, one of the big issues we found was accessibility. You know, the fact that technology is just really expensive, and once, you know, tech companies kind of they bring out their flagship latest high-end gadget, and then, you know, eventually it will get down to the people that can afford it in like 3 or 4 years time, but by that stage they've stopped supporting it, or, you know, they may only, you know, they may not, you know, they're all concentrating on the latest new thing that all the people with money are going to buy. So there's a real issue with this kind of, like, it's not just having the access to be able to access the technology, but it's being able to access it in the same way that other people who have, you know, more money or better education or whatever, you know, the gap is, you know. And I think that that's a really, these are these, so some of these sort of there's movements at the moment for things like not reuse, but like being able to like replace, like the right to fix things and things like that, so that technology actually lasts for longer. There's a lot of, you know, I mean, obviously battery technology is getting a lot better, so it will hopefully be able to use phones and things for longer, you know, because their batteries will be lasting longer. And I mean, there's a lot of issues that need to kind of be overcome in order for these kind of in order for everybody to be able to access technology at the same level. And it's a huge lot of things to overcome yet. And so, yeah, I mean, just getting people in the door is a first step, but then you have to be able to support them afterwards and actually be able to do that. So, yeah. There we go. That's my screen. I'm just reading some follow-ups here from Andre, actually. Yeah, democratization of innovation, right? So, yeah, so I mean, yeah, so intellectual property. So there's, I mean, obviously the big thing at the moment where we're talking about that is in terms of vaccines, right? Where you know, the rich Western countries have all the patents and that, and then they're not allowing poorer countries to be able to generate their own vaccines and things like that. And I mean, yeah, there's a lot of all of these. Yeah, I don't know how you deal with them. It gets really complicated really quickly. And I think that's why we have these problems, is that they're really complicated and mostly profit driven, unfortunately. And it comes back to kind of greed. And I mean, it's even greed at the extent of the country, right? The country, like the UK, for example, wants to vaccinate its population before it then sends out you know, vaccines to India, for example, where but at the moment we've vaccinated all of the, you know, the most vulnerable people. So shouldn't we be sending out vaccines to places that still have, you know, thousands and thousands of people dying every day? Like, that would just seem to be the moral choice, right? But I mean, that's not the only thing at play when governments make these decisions. And so there's a whole lot of complicated socio-political, economic choices that need to be made that I'm definitely out of my league in terms of trying to solve myself. But yeah. And then I think the final one is about the co-creating innovations with low-income people doesn't lead to different solutions, only the same but cheaper. It's a frugal innovation. I think, yeah, I mean, yes, I think you're right. We do need that. And I think that definitely frugal innovation. And I mean, there's sort of like some movements like slow tech, for example, that kind of move a little bit in that direction. There's things like the Fair phones and things of these world that are trying to kind of do some of that sort of stuff. But it's still, because of the fact that the underlying technology is still expensive. I mean, a lot of these rely on things like rare earth metals, which are still, you know, physically quite expensive as well. And, you know, there's a lot of patents and things involved, which are expensive. It just gets very, yeah, expensive. It's still expensive. And that's the problem, just to make stuff. Yeah. Anyway, that's my little rant about frugality. Sorry.
Thanks a lot, Catherine. So we have some two early questions from the chat which popped up directly after the presentations. I also want to discuss them both before the time runs out. So there's one question from Art on the Pulse project about measurement, and because it's one thing of the puzzle. Maybe you want to add something, Art.
Yeah, well, I think the question is clear, but in the meantime, I've heard so many parts of the discussion which would also be linked to that. And yeah, of course, the answer was already asked, the question was already asked for low-income families to go to the exhibition. You answered there already that reducing the price, well, brought some younger people in, but if I make it a little bit broader and yeah, having the risk that we cannot answer all these things, we know, for instance, that in our country, the Netherlands and Amsterdam, 40% of the children are sick and 25% are already obese. So that's a huge number in Amsterdam right now. In the whole of the Netherlands, it's a little bit lower. But it seems that they are indeed coming from the lower income families and less deprived families and so on. I wonder, by the way, and I'm not sure if Catherine has investigated that, if in low income and low education are the same groups. Probably not in all cases. That said, another big and very shocking message that we came across a couple of weeks ago in our country is that people with low income tend to live, I should say low income and lower education, tend to live 6 years shorter than the high educated people. Probably that's the same in other countries. So if you all consider this, and the complexity of health information, health promotion, health education. I came first to the original question: did you measure between children that did not go there and so on? So, well, now in the meantime, I have a lot of questions and remarks, but maybe first the question that I asked, Sheena.
Yeah, I saw your question as well. We didn't. We are still actually in the midst of evaluating. This is delayed because the one PhD who's in charge of that, she's had an accident and hit her head quite badly. So this is really delayed. But no, we don't. I mean, it would be wonderful to have these sort of things. We did have Justin Dillon, professor in science and formal learning from King's, following it, and he sees some things, but it's more feelings or noticing or what we've observed, but no data. I think we seldom get this big data, and I only know one in like the last 20 years at our science center where we even had time for sort of more data like that, which is a shame, but it could be cool. But yeah. It would need a kind of different funding, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Sheena. So we have 4 minutes left, and I got a question from Marie, which is a really good question, the last question, because she asked what were some of the challenges in reaching out into low-income families. So I would make it the one great challenge you had reaching these low-income families. Do you both have one great challenge? Maybe you solved the problem, so it's good to have a challenge and a solution.
Yeah, so I think it's I think it keeps being a challenge. I think the challenge, if I've just to say one thing, is to avoid stigmatizing people. So that's not always easy, and often it's more a concern on our side or maybe the funder's side. In reality, when we reach out to people from low-income areas, they often end up loving coming to visit us and don't seem to see themselves as stigmatized. But for me, that's something we really have to think of, if I'm just to bring one up.
Thank you.
I think for us, it was about recruitment was really hard. And I mean, I did things like I went on the local radio, and because of the way that we set up our recruitment thing, I could see what measures actually worked and what didn't. And so recruiting through our local university where we already had like this established relationship, we got maybe 1 or 2 families. Recruiting through the radio, we got 0 people. And this is not just about low income people, it's about anyone in Leicester. So it shows how many people listen to the local radio, I suppose. But then recruiting through the mums group, absolutely, like we got 10 families, and we had a whole bunch more who basically they wanted to do it, but they couldn't at this time, and or whatever. So it's really about knowing the challenge is to find the way in to the community, and it's about knowing the people that you're going to be working with, and understanding, you know, where is their trust placed. And the fact is that in the mums group, it's run by this lady who does a lot of community outreach. She helps to run the local food bank. She runs a whole bunch of mothers and babies groups, and does like you know, antenatal classes and things like that. And that was so she's well loved across the city, and you know, and so she was like the perfect person essentially to advertise this for us. And so it's about, if that's the challenge, I think, is to find that perfect person or that perfect group to be able to help you recruit, because if you don't have them on board, it's going to be a bit of an uphill battle.
Yeah, thank you. So I think this was really a fruitful discussion. I also took a look at the chat, and there's also a discussion. Really happy. So I want to give the word back to my colleague Sarah, who also plans all the program. So a big thank you to you, Sarah, because you made the whole content work. So thank you very much.
It was a pleasure, because I think both speakers had excellent presentations, and to pick up a little bit what we discussed. The one is a science exhibition, the other one is a university. So hopefully we can spread the word into the industry. Yeah, and we have more webinars coming up, actually. And Andre, you wanted to mention them as well. So.
Yes. So if this worked as an appetizer for you, there's more to come. There will be the next online workshop next week on May 5th on responsible innovation for smart cities. So in the context of smart cities, what role can responsible innovation play there? There will be, again, another webinar on public health and responsible innovation in the post-COVID Europe, which will be on May 20th. And there will be one more event on innovation tools for blind and visually impaired people on May 25th. If you're interested in one of them, or hopefully all of them, visit our website, living-innovation.net, register, and we will bother you with our emails, with our newsletters, with LinkedIn invites. So please don't be too angry if we bother you too much. We want to persuade you that living innovation, that responsible innovation is a good thing.
Thank you, Andre. And I just put the link into the chat. And yeah, again, thank you so much, Sheena. Thank you so much, Catherine. It was a pleasure. And yeah, have a nice afternoon, everybody. And hopefully see you soon in one of our following webinars. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you all.